already looked at this. That's gonna sit there. But what I can do, I can go ahead and start putting my drawer together because I know how big the opening is and how deep it's got to go. So I'm gonna work on my drawer. I went and found some material, some rough stock, so I can cut that out of. I got my plans. But I also, for my top, I went and found this. So this is just a glued up board. Looks perfect for the top. It's a little oversized, so it's already glued up. So I'm gonna save some work. I'm gonna reuse some, I don't know, someone was working on a project, but it's been abandoned. So looks fairly straight. It's got a little cup into it, but nothing the planer can't take out. And then my top will be ready to go. All of you know how to glue up stuff. If not, it's okay. When you take woods, you will. But I have the seam right here, just glued it up, and it's good to go. Now I can take it down to its thickness, okay? So I'll leave that. We can do that later when I'm almost done with this stuff. But the drawer is going to take a little bit of time. So I'm gonna just lay out what I need, and then I'm gonna go through the squaring steps. Once I get that square, we're gonna need to make a groove going through it. And then I'll explain a little more when we get to the dovetail joints. So, yeah, that's that. Okay, so I took this down, I planed it, started off with my squaring steps. I worked on my thickness first, brought it down to a 1/2 inch with my planer here. Then I brought it over and I found the best edge, and then I jointed it so that it's nice and perpendicular with my faces. And then I went over to the table saw and I cut it a 1/16 oversized. So I still have to run it through the joiner one more time to get it to size. Then my thickness and then my width are right, and then I'd work on my length. However, in this part here, I'm not gonna work on my length just yet and cross cut it because I need a groove through all my drawers that's at the bottom. And that's where the bottom of my drawer, I use 1/4 inch plywood later, it's gonna slide into there, okay? So I wanna cut that. Well, a nice efficient way of doing that is don't cut these up yet. I'll run a groove all the way down the whole length of this, then I can cut them to fit, and that way I'm not trying to cut 4 different parts here. I can do it all in one shot. So, and that way I know that they're exactly the same. They're cut with the same setup. So I'll do that, and just so you know what I'm doing, but that's it. For my groove, I have that already set up for 3/4 of an inch dados. That's all there. I don't want to mess with that because it takes a while to set that up. But what I can do that's a little quicker is I can use the blade that's already on here, because I know that the curve size of this blade standard is 1/8 of an inch thick. So what I can do is set it all up, set my depth, get my fence right, run it through once. That'll give me 1/8 of an inch. Well, I needed 1/4 of an inch, so that's equal to 2/8. So then I'll move my fence over 1/8 of an inch, and then I'll give me another 1/4 inch rip. So then my spacing will be a total of 1/4 of an inch. So little tricks like that that you can do to help speed things along. So here I have my piece, I have my groove going down, just like that. It's all squared up. These are the walls of my drawer. So I'm going to follow my plans, I'm going to cross cut these to length, and then we'll go to the dovetail jig. Now that I have my drawer pieces cut, I have my groove cut in, now we need to create, or we're going to create some dovetail joints. Alright, they're actually called half blind dovetail joints. There's full, there's all kinds of different types of dovetail joints, but pretty much they look like that. They're really strong, but they also look kind of decorative as well, so they look cool. The one thing that you need, they're really hard to do, but what helps make it easier, so kind of difficult, is what we call a dovetail jig. Okay, so the dovetail jig has lots of adjustment knobs, but the main technology that comes into play is this piece right here with all these little teeth. All right, this acts like a guide for a router that we use, and it has a little sleeve right here to run alongside here to create these joints. All right, so this actually requires a lot of setup. It takes some time to get it set up, especially different size boards and everything else. If you got a lot of them, you get it set up and then you're good to go for a while. But so what I did is I went ahead, I made some scrap pieces, and I went and pre-set this up. I was gonna do that in the video. I want to make sure I got it right, and got that to where these joints work out well. However, there's some tricks to it, which I'll show you that will be important for you, and it's all about the setup, just like a lot of things that we do here. All right, so number one, once you get your drawer pieces, you'll come over here. Let me make sure you can see this. You get your drawer pieces and you set them up like so, as if it was a drawer, okay? And then what you do, like if this was the drawer, you want to lay down all your pieces so that the inside is facing up. So I have this here, have this here, and have this here. Don't worry about I already cut some, and then my camera failed, so I had to redo this footage right here. But when you do that, now you need to mark that this is the inside of your boards. Well, being that I have a groove going down each spot, I don't need to label them. I know that these are the insides, the part with the groove on it. I also want to label my front and back and sides. For your sides, they actually call them your tailboards. So I'm going to put a T on here. And from your front and the back, those are your pin boards. So I'm going to put P for pin boards. I don't know why they call them that, but that's what it is. It has to do with the dovetail jig. Okay? Once those are labeled, you also need to label your corners. All right? There are 2 boards per corner. So I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to label these A, B, B. This corner here is going to be C, C. And then this corner here, D, D. That way there's going to be a lot of moving parts. I don't get confused which joint goes with where, different joints. So next thing what you want to do, let me back this up so you can see it better, is get your boards in the jig. So when you do that, you take your board and you actually open it up so that's inside out, and then you put the top always goes, the front and back of your drawers always goes on top, and then the sides of your drawers always go on the bottom for what we're doing, all right? And then you slide these in underneath this clamp, and you'll make an adjustment. Actually, what I'm going to do, let me get a different one here. You put these in your clamp, and when you make your adjustment, you have to adjust these teeth here for your dovetail jig so that it sits right on top of your board, so that's the same thickness. I have another one down here because these are narrow boards. I don't want it to go on an angle, so I'm having this one here, and I can loosen these knobs and get this set right. Once this is set right, I can tighten these knobs a little bit, and then I can bring up my side piece, get that into play so it's just touching the teeth. I don't want to push up on it because it'll bend. I can clamp in my side piece. Now my front piece, I can get that lined up right. Should be sitting right up on my side. I'll show you a better look here in a second. All right. And then I can clamp that down nice and snug. Okay, so here's what I did. On here, you have these teeth. You ride your side all the way up to the bottom of these teeth. You push your top in against your side piece there. And then how you know this offset here, another important piece of our technologies is black plate. And that is designed so that the geometry sets this perfectly. When you set this edge with this edge right here, it'll line these up exactly where they need to be so that the dovetail joints sit right. Okay? And then also another important part is this line right here. It's a groove that goes through all the teeth. And what you do is where that seam is you line up the back end of that line with that seam. So this seam goes right through that, just like that. Once you get it set up right, one thing I should add too, if you move it on this side of the seam or move that around, you can control how tight the teeth are. But this is set up right for what I want, right on that seam. Once you get it set, I just make sure everything's clamped up, still nice and tight. That way we can make our cut. And we're going to make our cut with the router. With the router, as you all should know, but if you don't, or if it's a different class in woods, this plate right here, you need to make sure when you go to cut that that plate is flat on our jig. You don't want it on an angle or like this because you'll nick those teeth and then this thing will be ruined. And when you start it, you want to make sure that bit is off of the teeth, not on it, like this. You want it off of it, you start it, and then you can go in. And what we're going to do after we turn it on is we're going to go in and out of all these teeth and ride it along this edge like that. Okay? Another trick here is to ride it all the way down and just cut the front of this, and that helps reduce tear out. But you'll see me do that in a second. All right, I'll do an example here, and then I'll speed up the rest. So hopefully this goes smooth. it off and just let it sit there until it stops. Make it back it out, then lift it up. Okay? So let's check it out. Looks like it cut right. Pull these out, bring them around, and then snug them together and see if that's going to work. Looks like it'll be tight, but I'm flush on the top and the bottom for the most part. So now I got my drawer pieces cut, and they're labeled so I know how they go together. I need to cut the bottom, because right now there's nothing in the bottom, and that's what that groove is for that we made. So I found some scrap plywood. It's got an alright finish on it. It's the inside of a drawer, so I don't really care. I'm just gonna cut this out. I can sand it and stain it later when I go to finish it, but I'm gonna reuse this, and then we'll slide it in there. First, I need to get my measurement. I have it on my plans, but for this, I want to cut it to fit. So I'm gonna make a nice custom cut to fit in that groove nicely. So what I'll do is I'll first get 2 joints snugged up. I'll measure from the inside to inside, add a 1/2 inch, because this is a 1/4 inch grooves that I have, and then I'll be able to figure out my exact width, and then I'll do my length here in a little bit too. So you can watch me do that. Always use glue. Glue is what's going to hold this together. I'm not using any nails. All right, so again, my SD card filled up, so I had to go fix that. So you missed that part of me finishing up or putting my drawer together after I cut my dovetail joints. I put glue in every seam. If you look at what I got going on, it turned out pretty nice. Wait a minute. There you go. Turned out pretty nice. Nice flush. We have some. These are dovetail joints. All right, this is the front of my drawer. It's got a nice bottom in there. It's all locked together. Got some weird stuff on the bottom, but that's okay. One thing, it doesn't look like a drawer yet because we need to put a face on here. Kind of like this is the casing of our drawer. Now we need a face on it, like our cabinet over there. But I have an example of one already made. All it is a board, and it has some overhang, and that way when you shut it, it doesn't continue to go into the cabinet. It stops right there, and it'll actually line up nice with the rest of the cabinet. So I'm gonna make that out of this stock here. Really, that's just a couple cuts, and that'll be done. I can attach this like I will. I will attach it to my drawer. All right, so I cut a board here. It was 4 inches wide by 8 3/4. And where that number comes from is I want this board to go on here, but I want it to have 1/2 inch margins, or to be overlapping a 1/2 inch on all sides, all the way around. So I'm gonna attach this, but what I need to do is give myself those 1/2 inch marks so that I can see. And actually, so how I'm gonna do that is with my ruler, which ran away. All right, never mind. So I could scribe a line all the way across, or I could just give myself a couple 1/2 inch marks. So here's a 1/2 inch. Down here, here's a 1/2 inch. Do the same down here. 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. Okay. And I'm gonna do the same over here. 1/2 inch. And I can come over here and do 1/2 inch here. If I line those up and I can see all those dots using this, then it should be good. And how I'm going to do this, I'll keep this the back. I want this to be the front. Let me just preset this to make sure it's all going to... Came in this morning and took off the clamps that were on my casing, and now we're sitting in a good spot. Here's what we got going. So I made all my parts. I have my casing right here. I have my face frame. I have my top, which I still have to plane down and make it look a little nicer. And then I have my drawer. All right, and then I have a handle here we'll install a little bit later, but some things that I want to do, we're going to have to attach the face frame at some point here. I'm going to plane this and then route the edges for this, and then I'm going to route the edges to match my top for that as well, and then attach my drawer. Once the face frame is on and attached, we have to create some rails for the drawer to go on. Once that's said and done, it should only take me like an hour. The nightstand's created. All we have to do is finishing, but I'm going to do a whole separate video on finishing and how to finish properly. So we'll do that later. Now for Rowdy, you saw earlier when we created the drawer, we used a portable router for the dovetail joints, which look nice, by the way. What we're gonna use to route out our edges of our top and our drawer front is we're going to use the router table. It's a little bit safer. You're moving the workpiece over the bit rather than moving the bit over the workpiece, so there's less moving parts. But basically it's the same setup. It's only a router just flipped upside down and mounted into a secured spot. So if you look, that's exactly what this is right in here. Just a router, and it's mounted really securely into this table. And with this router here, this one's like an actual router. I can take this out and just use it as a portable router. Just mount it to a table. This one's set up for a chamfered, which creates a 45 or an angled cut around it. I'm not looking for that look. I want a nice little rounded edge. So we have this here that's set up for a rounded edge. I first want to do a test cut to make sure that it's still set up for the way I want it. It looks good, but I'm not going to assume. Don't ever assume. All right, so here we go. With routers, there's a bearing on most bits. If you look, there's this little wheel right here. See it spinning around? That helps guide the wood as you're passing it through. It rolls on this wheel and it stops it from going into the router anymore. Otherwise, you would need a fence. Now, this fence is hooked up to the dust collector right here, so I'm just moving it close. But I'm not going to use the fence because I have this bearing right here that kind of works the same way. If there was no bearing, I would have to set this up, line it up right, and then pass my board through. But for this case, I use a bearing. I tell all my students, just find a router bit that has a bearing. If it doesn't have a bearing, don't use it, or ask for my assistance. There's something wrong with it. It's just there's a little bit more to it, and it's a little more dangerous. So. Okay, so you might have noticed when I was routing that I kind of was holding my board a little goofy, straight up on end, like this. When I was cutting like that, it makes it kind of hard to hold it straight. That was goofy. Usually you'd want to just do it like I did the drawer, where you put it face down and work your way around. However, I didn't do that because I had to create a design change for my tabletop. What happened is I have some mistakes in my plans, and I don't like to call them mistakes. I had to create a design change is what I like to call it. So pretty much it was too short and it wasn't sticking out enough, and I didn't compensate for the thickness of this face frame, just the casing. So it was like sitting flat on here. I wanted it to stick out like an inch. Okay, well, in order for me to do that properly, there's going to be a gap in the back, and I need that to be tight on the back here. So I took a board, I cut it down, and I created what's called the backsplash, which is typical for a design like this. You ever have a pencil lay or a pen lay on your nightstand or something and it roll off the back? Well, this right here is a backsplash, so it's called the backsplash. You might have them in your bathroom, but basically it stops anything from going that way. You know, it's going to sit tight against the wall, so it's going to look nice. Well, I attached it, and I wanted a round part right here in the corner. Yeah, I got some burns I'll have to sand out, but I wanted it to be round right here with my edges, so I had to put it up on end like this in order to get that round edge. So different tweaks and different things that you can do to make it look good, because I didn't want it to look bad, and it was going to look bad if I just went with it. It was pretty much flush with my face frame and look goofy. So, okay, here I have my drawer. I found a handle in my closet. It's not your typical handle for a drawer. Usually they're like 3 inches, especially for something small like this, but all I have is this 4-inch one. So I need to plant that. I want it to be centered in this drawer perfectly. So in order for me to do that, I have to measure. So I need to find the midpoint of this drawer, and then I can measure from that midpoint. Okay, there's other ways to do it, but this is how I do it. Okay, I know that from the center point of this hole of my handle here, from this center point to this center point is 4 inches. I measured it, okay? And they come with these short screws to go in. So what I'm gonna have to do is find those 2 points out here on the space of my plane. I'm gonna drill a hole all the way through. Then I'm gonna have to flip it over, and because these screws are so short, I'm gonna use a special bit, which is used a lot in carpentry and cabinet making, is a countersink. Now what this does is, yes, it drills a hole, but then it has a tapered end, kind of like the shape of a screw. That way the screw head sits nice and flush on the surface, so it's not sticking out. You ever have screw heads that are sticking up and out? That's because of that head up there. It's tapered. It can crack the wood if you don't do it. So these are a cabinet maker's best friend. So you can watch me do that. Had some trouble getting the countersink because I didn't have a lot of room in here, but I was able to make it work, and I got the screws sticking out the bottom. Now I can attach my front here. Now ideally, you don't want to do this. I have the holes done. I would put this off to the side, and then I would do all my finishing and sanding and all that. But just for this video, I'll show you. But I will be taking it off for finishing it. There we go. And my drawer has a handle. Done deal. All right, now I'm gonna attach the top. All right, I took my face frame off here. Typically I put the face frame on first, but I'm not going to because it'll allow me to get in here. And I'm just gonna screw the top on for right now. That way it's good to go and I can attach it or detach it as well. Because I'm gonna need to get in here for putting in the drawer. It's kind of important. So I don't want this stuff to be in the way. If I have this off, then I can reach in and work in here or work from the back. But the top is super simple. Basically, you get it on here. I want it flush with the back, so I put this flat and put this down flat, and that should be flush. And then I want to center it so that it's correct. I have it 1 inch on both sides, hanging off. And then once that's set, all I'm going to do is countersink holes using my countersink bit, which I lost it, but it's around here. And then I'm just going to screw some screws. The most important part, or the worst thing that can go wrong, is that you screw through the top. You don't want to screw through the top, okay? So you make sure you measure, you find the right size screw, you make sure you don't countersink too deep, and then you just screw it on. I'll eventually glue it, but like I said, I'm just going to screw it on for right now. So you can watch this. So that's done. Now, this is on here. I can easily take it off, undoing those screws. Quick disclaimer. Here I have these are drywall screws. You shouldn't be using these to build cabinets with. So I just want to put that out there, especially if some parents are watching. They're like, what? He's using drywall screws. They're weak. They're made for drywall. They're not for this. But this is what I have a lot of, and they work great for this demo. So I'm just going to use these. Cabinet screws can be expensive. They're just harder steel. Like, they're strong. So just saying that. But going forward, how I would attach this is I would put glue all around my casing. I would apply this here, and then I would clamp it. And the glue should hold it. You can secure it with screws and different things. For the sake of this demo, I'm not requiring when you build this in my class for you to do this, but I'm gonna use the Craig jig, and I'm gonna get it so that I can put screws coming up so that I can attach this with screws, and then my screws will be my clamp. That way I can continue working on this for this video. Screws work just like a clamp. It holds it nice together using a wedge wrapped around a cylinder or a spiral in a spiral shape. So I'll wedge it in there with the screw and it'll hold it nice and tight. That way I can use a flush trim router, show you what that's all about, and then we can set our guide rails for our drawer, and then this thing's pretty much done. But a couple more shots here, and then we're good. All right, so. I went ahead and took my top off of my cabinet, and one thing that's common, that's nice to use, a great tool, well, is the router. First of all, as you can see, we've used a router a lot in this project. Routers get used a lot in woodworking. They're amazing tools. The interchangeable bits, what makes them awesome. The bit I have in here is what we call a flush trim router bit. Now this bit, you can get little short ones or you can get some longer ones on it. It has a little bearing on it, as you can see, and then it's just a sharp blade, two of them that goes spinning really fast. What that does is, since wood is not perfect and life isn't perfect, I don't know if you noticed that, everything going on, just things aren't perfect. But we got to deal with it. And then what is perfect is our ability to adapt to situations. We are awesome. Maybe I shouldn't be so bold to call it perfect, but we're still here, you know? We've made it through a lot of crazy stuff in this world, and we're going to continue to thrive. So we just got to get through it. That's it. So keep your head up. Inspirations by Mr. White. Okay, anyways, we have here, it's not flush with my plywood. When I come down here, it actually is. It's nice and flush. But up here, there's a little taper there. So something must not have been perfectly square. So it could be my saw. I could have been cutting and my saw is a little bit off and it threw things off a little bit. There's lots of things of why that could be. All right, I'm not going to try to solve that right now because I could just use a flush trim bit and it'll clean that right up and make it look awesome. The only thing is my dimension's going to change. But in cabinet making, it's not making it perfect, it's making it look perfect. And that's with all woodworking, it's just making it look good. That's why we use trim board. That's why we use different things, because wood is always moving, expanding, contracting, you know, with the temperature and the pressure in the air, it's just moving, you know. Metal's not so much, it does move, but not so much. So with wood, we have strategies such as trimming or a flush trim router bit that we use to cover up imperfections and make it look or appear as if it's perfect. So I'm going to do this. You're going to watch me route this out, and that's that. Last things I got to do here, besides sand and finish and all those other things, is I need to create some sort of guide for my drawer to sit on. There's lots of ways you can do that. Probably the easiest way to do that is you go to the store and you buy yourself a little drawer guide kit. They have adjustable ones, different sized ones, all that. I have a lot of wood on hand. I'm just going to make one. But if I had a whole kitchen set of cabinets and I was trying to install a bunch of drawers, I'd probably go the easier route and get all the guides. That way they're all the same, they're perfect. They make self-closing ones, which are really nice. But for this cabinet, I'm going to make my drawer guides because it's relatively simple. Basically, I'm just going to create some boards and create little L's out of them and stick them in there. But I'm going to measure them and cut them to fit. But as you can see, this isn't being supported by anything. So what I'm going to do is lay this down, find out where my board, where my drawer, planes out with the edge here. Give myself a line on this part here. That way I know where to place my rail, because I'll put a little ledge right here and then I'll put a little ledge right here, and that way it has some support. But I also want it to not rock back and forth this way, so I'm going to put a little guide on the side here. That way when you slide the drawer in and out, it goes straight. Drawers can bind up and kink if they don't have the proper guidance. So I'm going to do that, and you can watch me. Oh yeah, and we got to cut out our case back, but that is super simple, and you'll see how that is. right, you probably noticed that was a little frustrating, but it can be when you start working in tight quarters like that. The drawer, I was able to get it. Where I really was having troubles with my counter sinks. I didn't have the right size Allen to set it right, and it kept slipping off, and then I burned myself because it was hot, and I was getting upset. But being upset and working on wood projects or any projects is not a good way to go. That's when you start making mistakes, and the project becomes less enjoyable. I'm all good now. Took a deep breath, had some caffeine, I'm good. All right, so I have my drawers in there, my drawer guides. I tested the drawer, works out great. Now the last part is this backing. Remember that little groove or rabbit, it's called, that we cut all along here? Well, we set it 1/4 of an inch deep. Okay, well that's nice. We have 1/4 of an inch plywood. The reason why I waited to the end is because you just never know if it's racked or if it's not the right size or if you have to make adjustments. So it can wait to the very end to be the last piece that you attach. Now, I'm gonna cut it. I'll put it on there, but I'm not gonna attach it yet. Just like I'm not attaching the top, just because I'm gonna do some finishing work on it, and it's easier to access for sanding and setting stuff up. I just get it cut, that way it's done. I can finish the piece, the backing, and then I'll be able to put it all together and it'll look great at the end. So I'm just simply gonna measure this out, find a piece of 1/4 inch plywood, and then cut it to fit. Now I could make it extend all the way to the bottom right here, but I'm just gonna make it end right here and be flush with this bottom part, just because it'll go all the way tight up to the top. But I want it to stop right here. It doesn't matter, if I went all the way down, I can, but I'm just gonna stop here. Just, to me, that seems right. If it goes on a floor that's unlevel, that might get in the way of stuff, so I'm gonna stop it right there. All right. Okay, there you have it there. Project's done. I mean, it's not done. I have a lot of sanding to do, but I'm gonna do a video on finishing, to go through different types of finishing and things that you could do with this. So it's not complete 100% done. I wouldn't sell this, but at this point, but for putting it together in assembly, this is great. As you can see, I followed my plans and I was able to make a few adjustments here and there, nothing too critical. I wasn't designing while I was going because this would take me forever to do that. All right, yes, SolidWorks or designing on computer-aided software, it takes a little bit of time, but the time saved outweighs, the benefits outweighs going in there and trying to do that, you know, like shooting at the hip or whatever expression you want to use, but that's how you do it. That's how engineers do it. That's how anyone that does it, you gotta have plans, okay? And make sure that you have things figured out before you just go cutting material up. Material's expensive. This here, I would say, I could try to sell this. I would sell this for close to $100, $75. You know, that's something. If I was making a lot of them, I would do it way differently. I'd set up some sort of assembly line, you know, to try to make things more efficient and drive that price down a little bit. But it's all solid oak, except for the plywood, but you can't tell that we use plywood, can you? You know, unless you look at the back, then you have these end grains that are showing. But the back doesn't matter because that goes up against the wall, so that's okay. Other things that you could do to make this better, I mean, there's lots you could do. You could add trim board. I could add a trim board right here as a decorative piece a decorative piece. You could put trim board all the way around on this top to kind of cover that open seam that's right there. I've seen that done a lot. But yeah, follow your plans, generate some plans, and then you can make some really cool things. I know it seems like a simple who wants a nightstand, but if you can master the concepts that are done in this video, they're relatively simple. It's just a process. You can make huge things like a giant entertainment center, or we're building right now a giant trophy case for the middle school. We're doing the exact same thing. We're making the casing, we're putting it on the face frame. It's not gonna have any drawer, but it'll have some glass doors. So it'll have a top, all those things. So all the same concept, it's just bigger. So yeah, thank you very much. Make sure you go through the worksheets as always, and I'll give you, because this might be a two-part video, I'll give you another code word to put in the worksheet. The code word is going to be police. All right.